Heyo and welcome to How Would You Build, a little series in which I take your favorite characters from fiction, fantasy, and all forms of media and attempt to build them in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. In this series, we'll be using all source books from Wizards of the Coast, except the 2024 revision of the Player's Handbook. If you have any suggestions for characters, make sure to drop them in the comments, join the Discord to post a request on the DnD channel, or ask me directly on my coffee. Additionally, the full character build written down with backstory suggestions will be there as well, along with some free builds from previous series. In this episode, we will be building the Feverish Gambler himself, Kinji Hakari. I know this build has been eagerly awaited, and now here it is. But before that, be aware that it will contain spoilers for the manga Jujutsu Kaisen, since we haven't seen him in the show just yet. So if you haven't gone through it, I thoroughly recommend that you flip through those pages, but if you don't care, we will try our best to build this positively feverish character as close as possible to what we see in the manga. This means that we want a character who is a feverish gambler, a hothead and a strategic brawler who tempers his punishing blows with experience and proficiency in cursed energy reinforcement. With sheer raw power, Hakari can both deal devastating singular blows to his foes and heal himself incredibly quickly from most forms of damage in and out of combat. As expected, we'll also tackle his domain expansion, Private Pure Love Train, to gain unkillable mode and absolutely outlast our enemies with sheer endurance, while whittling away at their health, giving Hakari every opportunity to gamble with his life. Before we start building our feverish gambler, a little disclaimer. Hakari will be very close to the archetype that Mahoraga embodies. By that I mean the unkillable juggernaut who can survive literally everything, but he will be different in the sense that this version of Hakari focuses more on recovering from damage rather than preventing it outright. If you prefer a build that requires less gambling with health and outlasting the enemy by outhealing their damage, I recommend that you give a look to the Mahoraga build video that I've done before, and that you adapt the flavor accordingly, as both builds work just as well. But for ability scores, we shall create them now with these standards array. For our Feverish Gambler, we will first give him a 15 in dexterity. Hakari moves easily in the middle of a fight, and has thrown out completely uncanny dropkicks on people like Kashimo and Raume from unexpected angles. Next is Charisma at 14 and Wisdom at 13. Hakari knows the way the Jujutsu world works, with their regulations, and has been running an underground fight club without much apparent difficulty. He manages to rally people to trust him and can easily put an act to get to someone like Megumi to befriend him for later. Then, his constitution will be 12, which we will, as usual, cover with a little bit of tanky magic, ability score increases, feats, and general shenanigans. Finally, we will dump intelligence at 10 and strength at 8. Hakari's curse technique is incredibly complex and convoluted, but he uses it in an instinctual way and clearly has been doing so for quite a while. So while he's not dumb and clearly understands his technique, his natural understanding of the world comes into play more often than his intellect. His strength being so low makes little sense for a unit like Hakari, especially since his strength comes from his sheer physical ability alone. If you would like to lean more into this aspect of Hakari, then feel free to adapt it using a more martial build or checking out the Mahoraga build instead. His physical prowess in this build will come from his sheer unarmed damage potential and some of his more damaging spells becoming very strong punches. For Hakari's species, it will come as no surprise that we will get Variant Human. This grants us an ability score increase of 1 point to Dexterity and Wisdom, along with a bonus proficiency in Performance to hit that signature dance after we drop our domain expansion, and also a bonus feat, which for us will be Fighting Initiate Unarmed Fighting for a d8 of damage when we hit those unarmed strikes. Hakari is a human, albeit an especially exceptional one. His physical prowess is notable enough for other sorcerers to talk about it, and for Yuji to feel his life-threatening blows, despite the fact that Yuji usually just powers through pain. Leaning into this side of Hakari works for the purpose of being more dangerous in these earlier levels, but if you wish, you could also start with a lucky feat to really nail down the Feverish Gambler in Hakari. For Hakari's background, we will construct a custom background called Feverish Gambler. This background will give us the skills of acrobatics and insight, along with proficiency in pachinko machines, or whatever the equivalent of a gambling machine is in your setting. For the equipment, we will start off with a few gambler games, be it scratch cards, a mini handheld pachinko, or some other set that fits your setting's preferences. A lucky charm can be having our magnificent haircut or by having Karara around. Fine clothes will be either his Jujutsu Tech outfit or his tank top fur coat combo that he wears as a bookie. Finally, a little head start with 15 gold to properly begin earning the reputation of a feverish gambler. For the feature, we will grab Never Tell Me the Odds. Hakari has a solid grasp on the inner workings of the Jujutsu world, trying to benefit from a chaos that he predicted far ahead of time. His plans may look like wildly improbable gambles, but they are, in reality, well-adjusted schemes to overcome his foes and benefit the path he chose for himself. In the end, though, Hakari is always ready to put his very life on the line for those whose fever he respects, burning hottest when putting it all on the line to do his work for his peers and his friends, like a true gambler. For Hakari's levels, we begin at level 1 as a sorcerer. This grants Hakari proficiency in daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows, and proficiency in the saving throws of Constitution and Charisma. Along with the saving throws, we also have the skills of Arcana and Persuasion. And finally, an equipment that consists of a crossbow and 20 bolts to whittle away the pesky enemies that we deal with in these earlier, very dangerous levels. An arcane focus that could be a picture from his signature pachinko game based off Private Pure Love Train. Your version of Hakari will clutch this for boosting your Jujutsu with a burning hot fever. Then we have an explorer's bag to keep Hakari cozy and always ready to get good sleep when he needs to. And finally, 2 daggers to represent a simple starting weapon to use for practical purposes more than fighting, since for close quarters, nothing like a good dropkick to fix our foes right up. For the first level subclass, we will grab Divine Soul. For the features of the subclass, we will first get Divine Magic, which we will grab the alignment of Neutral. At this level, especially in settings with supernatural foes like JJK, protection from evil and good represents a necessary cursed energy reinforcement against these foes and some of their more dangerous effects like possession. Soon, we will drop it as a way to blast the foe with a massive burst of cursed energy. The second feature we get from this subclass is Favored by the Gods. Like a true feverish gambler, getting plus 2d4 to an important saving throw or attack once will make enemies feel like Hakari is truly blessed by the gods with unearthly luck. For spells at this level, we get 4 cantrips and 3 first level spells. And for cantrips, we will get Guidance, Thunderclap, Minor Illusion, and Prestidigitation. Guidance will really benefit Hakari's skill checks, always with a wild stroke of luck away from success. Feel free to share that with others or keep it to yourself. It could just be your own little unexplainable knack to use skill to grasp your luck. Minor Illusion and Prestidigitation allows you to expend the elements of your domain and roll that 1 in 239 chance. For now, the only boost our domain grants us is defensive, but it will get better as we carry on with the build. Thunderclap will be Hakari punching the ground and sending out an audible shockwave around himself to damage slippery, high AC foes or multiple smaller opponents swarming him. For spells, we get Shield and Mage Armor. These 2 spells will be the ever-important Cursed Energy Reinforcement, rendering Hakari very difficult to hit when he needs to stay on the field or takes a straight attack at these earlier levels. For level 2, we get our first multi-class into Monk, which will grant us proficiency in simple weapons and short swords, along with a feature of Unarmored Defense. When not using his Cursed Energy Reinforcement, Hakari is still a force to be reckoned with, and his natural reflexes, physicality, and speed allow him to remain a capable combatant just when it comes down to physical ability alone. Martial Arts will be the second feature that we get, and this allows Hakari to add dexterity to his unarmed strikes, allowing him to forego the use of a crossbow that saved him from the earlier levels as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Now he deals 1d8 plus 3 damage once as an attack and another time as a bonus action. Feel free to roleplay both attacks, hitting as it being a drop kick coming from absolutely nowhere, decking your foes straight on the head. At level 3, we get our final multi-class, which will be in Cleric, and this will grant us the multi-class proficiencies of light and medium armor along with shields. And for the domain of choice, we will get Life Domain. Now, I know that this choice of class and domain might sound odd, but for Hakari, there is nothing more important than people's fever. Hear me out. According to him, that's how people fall in love, making brash decisions to change their lives, and how people stop thinking and act on instinct. I interpret that fever Hakari describes as being the very human moment of letting your feelings take over and doing what your instincts push you to do. throwing yourself into a complete leap of faith that just feels right. In a way, Hakari celebrates living one's life to the fullest with complete abandon and high intensity, doing what we love for those we love. I can't see it in any other way than celebrating what makes life passionately worth living. And so for that reason, we have chosen this class and this subclass. And for the features, we get proficiency in heavy armor, which makes sense since Hakari is an absolute unit, and even reducing his movement speed by 10 feet is honestly not that bad. For the second feature we get, it will be Disciple of Life. This feature will be profoundly crucial to making Hakari able to recover from all sorts of damage. Adding 2+ spell level to healing spells we use renders most of those able to out-heal damage in some cases, whereas healing alone cannot do that in D&D 5th edition. For spell casting, we get 3 cantrips, and we can prepare 2 spells, not counting our domain spells. And for the cleric cantrips that we will choose, we will get Light, Thaumaturgy, and Resistance. Light lets Hakari shine bright with immense amounts of cursed energy, while Thaumaturgy adds even more effects to his already visually overstimulating domain expansion. Resistance, on the other end, will be another little bit of luck to help out Hakari in moments where he normally would get very hurt. For cleric spells, we will get Bless, Cure Wounds, Shield of Faith, and Detect Magic. Bless and Cure Wounds will start as domain spells. Hakari is a figure who inspires his friends and drives an immense amount of power from helping them succeed at their objectives. Adding a d4 in combat and healing with a touch will be benefits that he will give both to his party with his presence and to himself when it comes to the heal. Shield of Faith adds more cursed energy reinforcement by boosting his AC by 2 points, bringing it from 16 to 18, and then adding shield to it, making it reach 23 AC. A truly impressive defense at this level. Detect Magic makes sense in terms of being able to sense cursed energy spirits and cursed energy itself. We don't see Hakari being particularly vigilant over it other than noting Kashimo's cursed energy property. Finally, and importantly, we will swap Protection from Evil and Good to get Inflict Wounds. This will be where Hakari starts becoming a threat in melee. Combining that with his higher survivability allows Hakari to occasionally dish out a metal-bending, earth-rending blow to his foes, or stray cursed spirits around himself. Level 4, we continue with another level of Sorcerer, and this grants us Font of Magic. This feature represents Hakari's near-endless cycle of regaining cursed energy. After all, he is one of 3 people in the show who can open a domain expansion multiple times, the other ones being Sukuna and Gojo. If you need a 5th level spell slot later for a specific combo, make sure to exchange your sorcery points to get that extra bit of power. We finally get 2nd level spell slots, and at this point we obtain the spell of Absorb Elements. This will be another quintessential cursed energy reinforcement technique. Absorb Elements makes characters like Kashimo much less of a threat. Halving elemental damage massively increases Hakari's defenses as well, and prevents a large portion of his problems when it comes to enemies trying to get around spellcasting. At level 5, we get another level of Sorcerer, and at this point we get Meta Magic. First one we obtain is Quickened. Getting to bash a foe only to drop a spell down like Resistance or other kinds of spells to increase your survivability will be massively helpful. Get creative with your cantrips, and Hakari will get a major increase to his survivability, or maybe a punch followed by a little bit of an Inflict Wounds. Extended will be our second option. This makes spells like Mage Armor have a duration of 8 hours, and it also means that when they are extended, they can end up lasting through a long rest, saving you the need to get buffed up without many spell slots left. Your sorcery points also come back on a long rest, letting you be at your full power with only a little bit of prep. For spells at this level, we get our first 2nd level spell, which will be Earthen Grasp. Earthen Grasp allows Hakari to try and trap his foes with a set of train doors themed after the romance manga Private Pure Love Train, crushing opponents who get stuck in the grasp of those metal doors, allowing Hakari to throw down blows at advantage, an ace that any gambler would love to have up in their sleeve. At level 6, we get a 4th level of Sorcerer, and at this point, we get the feat Lucky. As much as bumping up our charisma would be useful, Hakari is also incredibly lucky, to the point where if he wasn't the 6-foot unit, Halfling might have been more useful for their luck trait. Lucky lets Hakari turn disadvantage into Elven Accuracy Advantage, where he can choose which of the 3 dice rolled to use for his save, attack, or ability. Feel free to throw down odd attacks that would normally be a disadvantage if you really need to hit an opponent, by hitting prone, for example. For this level spellcasting, we get 1 more cantrip and 1 more 2nd level spell, which will be Blade Ward and Aid. Blade Ward represents a momentary focus on defense, rendering Hakari resistant to physical damage from attacks. Make sure to throw it down as an action or a bonus action, depending what you want to do with your turn. Aid won't just be Hakari bolstering his resilience and physical tenacity, but also bolstering the confidence and willingness to fight of his friends by his presence alone. He is a valuable ally to have, and seeing what he withstands is both terrifying and immensely inspiring to allies and foes alike, like how he essentially struck a deal with the most volatile competitor of the culling games, Kashimo. At level 7 we get another level of Sorcerer, and at this point we get the optional feature of Magical Guidance. Spending sorcery points to reroll a failed ability check once, don't mind if he does. Our Feverish Gambler can manipulate his luck by seizing it with a skill more and more as we go down into these levels. At this point, we get more spell slots of 3rd level, and we also get the spell Aura of Vitality. Now this is an absolutely insane spell, granting 2d6 hit points every round as a bonus action is already good on its own, but over an entire minute is actually mind-bending. At this level, after combat, Hakari can heal an average of 120 hit points in 10 turns, counting the +5 that he gets from Disciple of Life, which works with every use of a healing spell, not every casting of it. This makes Aura of Life heal up to 17 hit points every round, and an average of 12 per round. Don't forget to blast the music, bring up the illusions, and get that jackpot rolling early to recover from a difficult fight where you lost an arm, for example. At level 8, we get Empowered Healing. This allows Hakari to gamble with healing, which fundamentally makes his use of Aura of Vitality even better than it normally is. For spellcasting at this level, we will get Vampiric Touch as a 3rd level spell and 4th level slots. Vampiric Touch will be a temporary spell that will give us both offense and healing. Unfortunately, this spell struggles with a lot of issues. First being that it's necrotic damage, and that damage type isn't exactly perfect. Second, the healing, even when dealing maximum damage, isn't exactly great, and the range itself prevents stacking with Aura of Vitality. So this level will help us gain a sense for how odd this spell ends up being, and next level we will choose to stick with Aura of Vitality for the purposes of this build, since it will give us much better recovery than Vampiric Touch. For 9th level, we get another slot of 4th level, and we will replace Vampiric Touch with the spell Glyph of Wording, and we will add the spell Beacon of Hope to our arsenal as well. And now we are starting to assemble our domain expansion. With Glyph of Warding, we can store both Earthen Grasp and Beacon of Hope, and then have these 2 spells lock down the foes at the start of the fight, and then maximize Aura of Vitality to grant Hakari 17 hit points of essentially regeneration every single turn. Combining that with Hakari's general defensive ability and one-on-one damage potential, you have a build that can really outlast most opponents by just chaining jackpots and beating them down within 4 minutes and 11 seconds while your theme blasts in the background. At level 10, we get an 8th level of Sorcerer, and this grants us +2 Charisma. Hakari's Jujutsu technique strengthens in power, allowing Earthen Grasp and Inflict Wounds to land much easier, and the overall damage potential of Thunderclap to be far more reliable. For spells, we get a slot of 5th level and another slot of 4th level, and at this point we will obtain the 2nd level spell, Mind Whip. Now that we have obtained Mind Whip, this allows us to complete Hakari's domain expansion, Idle Death Gamble. This spell specifically will enable Hakari to put into play the initial effect of his domain, which, upon opening, floods his opponent's brain with all the information pertaining to his domain, its activation effect being both instant and usually impossible to defend against, since it's harmless and just quite confusing. This is how you set up Idle Death Gamble as Hakari. First, for the spells that you will need, you will require a Glyph of Warding with Mind Whip in it, and another Glyph of Warding with Beacon of Hope. Make sure that you place down a 4th level Glyph of Warding containing Mind Whip, of the level required to target as many enemies as you expect, and daze them with all the information of your domain. Up to 5th level, using your sorcery points to convert them into an adequate spell slot. The trigger will be with cast the spell within the glyph on the nearest target upon saying Domain Expansion. Feel free to refine your trigger as much as your DM allows to avoid friendly fire. A true gambler never gambles with the lives of others. After this, you place down a 3rd level Glyph of Warding containing Beacon of Hope, and the trigger will be the exact same as the previous glyph, the only difference being that the spell will be cast on the nearest target upon saying Domain Expansion, so make sure that you stand on top of that glyph. You will then goad your foe into charging you, since it takes an action to make a successful investigation check to spot a glyph, while you hold Minor Illusion. Once your designated foe walks towards you, trigger your 1-minute Minor Illusion to play your romance novel themed music, and prepare to unleash your auto-healing. Most fights end before reaching the 1-minute mark in terms of turns, so this cantrip lets you blast your theme as loud as a scream for the entire duration of the fight, usually. Cast Aura of Vitality and get your Burning Fever on. If you're quite wounded and the fight is over quickly, consider extending Aura of Vitality to get 20 turns worth of healing out of combat, possibly healing for an absolute maximum with an extended Beacon of Hope in a glyph for upwards of 340 hit points. Before and throughout the fight, feel free to cast Earthen Grasp, Inflict Wounds, and even Extended Aid, Extended Mage Armor, or the occasional Quicken Blade Ward to resist your foe's blows and get a taste of their fever before going all out. For level 11, we get another slot of 5th level, and we will obtain the spell Death Ward. Death Ward is a powerful tool for survival, especially if you extend it and cast it on yourself multiple times. After all, since the duration of similar spells overlap, when one ends, the next one will just come into effect, allowing Hakari to survive instant death and 0 hit points up to 5 times per day, possibly more if we expend more sorcery points as we level higher spell slots too. Feel free to expand your sorcery points before every single long rest and your remaining higher level spell slots to be absolutely ready to unleash your domain and survive through pretty much anything, including instant death. At level 12, we get another level of sorcerer, and this grants us an additional meta magic. We will grab the Twinned meta magic. This allows Hakari to blast his foes with a double up inflict wounds, dispatching cursed spirits with all but a single power slap. Additionally, you could totally share some of these benefits with your friends in the guise of benefiting them through the sheer inspiring act of surviving death blows. Feel free to choose any other meta magic option, as there are some strong contenders like Subtle to deal with counter spells, Seeking for highly armored enemies, or maybe even Heightened to make those spells stick more, like the doors or the sheer volume of domain information blasting through someone's head. At this level, for spells, we get an additional cantrip, and we get a slot of 6th level. For the cantrip, we will grab Word of Radiance and the 4th level spell, Freedom of Movement. Word of Radiance will let Hakari blast sheer cursed energy around himself by just striking a dance, or even mentioning the word fever. Scorching foes with different damage types might work against the pesky undead or foes weaker to this damage type. If your DM has a better idea for a homebrew cantrip, or allows the homebrew use of Booming Blade without the expensive material component, consider those options as well. Freedom of Movement will let Hakari fix a very, very difficult issue, namely handling paralysis and movement impeding abilities like the attacks that grapple you as well. Shambling Mounds will have absolutely nothing on Hakari anymore. That is a certainty. At level 13, we get an 11th level of Sorcerer, and at this point we get the 6th level spell Otherworldly Guise. Otherworldly Guise upgrades Hakari's damage potential by quite a bit. Immunity to 2 different pairs of damage types depending on your choice of fever, along with poison or charm immunity, 40 feet of flight, +2 AC, an additional attack and magic punches. Yes, a weapon attack. Includes unarmed attacks, since unarmed attacks are melee weapon attacks. I know, it gets a little confusing, but feel free to look it up yourself. Get your fever burning high though with this spell and blast some physical damage into your opponents. If you ever get low, heal up using Cure Wounds, maximized by a glyphed Beacon of Hope. Otherwise, cycle your idle death gamble and blast through some healing using Aura Vitality, while your foes waste resources trying to destroy you. At level 14, we get a 12th level of Sorcerer, and at this point we increase our Constitution by 2 points. This will make Hakari even more resilient, and will allow him to stick by multiple fights while chaining the jackpots to outlast his foes with sheer regeneration. For spellcasting at this point, our spells are unchanged, but we get a slot of 7th level for more shenanigans. Then at level 15, we get access to 7th level spells, and at this point we get the spell Regenerate. Speaking of regeneration, with the spell Regenerate, we can now grab Hakari's limbs when they go flying off and instantly knit them back into his body instantly. Even falling to 0 hit points doesn't matter anymore, since we have several death wards, and also come back with 1 hit point if our foe can't finish Hakari off in one fell swoop. Don't forget that with Beacon of Hope active, Regenerate instantly heals 56 hit points, adding Disciple of Life, and that 1 hit point of regeneration at the start of the turn becomes 10 since you add 9 from Disciple of Life, turning Hakari's regeneration to 27 hit points per turn, with 10 of those being completely unconscious, truly hitting the jackpot. At level 16, we get a 14th level of Sorcerer, and at this point we get the subclass feature Otherworldly Wings. One to arc through the air, winding up your devastating punches, transition from a haymaker into a side-swept head-level dropkick, or maybe you just want to walk along walls seemingly glued to the ceiling. Instead of wings, Hakari's version of this feature will simply be a very visible, constant bonfire of cursed energy pouring from him. And along this feature, we also get a slot of 8th level. At level 17, we get a 15th level of Sorcerer, and at this point, we get the 6th level spell, Heal. Heal will be Hakari's emergency domain expansion. If a certain Kashimo is just blasted through you with a devious lightning bolt, recover all that damage and then some. Don't forget to get your average 27 hit points worth of regeneration every single turn as well, to really survive pretty much anything. At level 18, we will get a 16th level of Sorcerer along with the Tough Feat, adding 2 hit points per total character level to our max health. Hakari is one tough cookie, and he withstands all sorts of deadly damage without immediately perishing, and is walking off having his arm blown off. His resilience for pain and lack of care for bodily harm certainly describes him as one tough cookie. His spellcasting at this point will grant him a 9th level spell slot, but the spell selection will remain unchanged. At level 19, we get a 17th level of Sorcerer, and at this point, Hakari gains access to either the Subtle Metamagic, the Seeking Metamagic, or the Heightened Metamagic. Depending on your setting and the defenses of the enemies, any of these options might be right for you. I personally would choose Subtle, since the versatility offered by silent, no movement casting allows for casting even when shackled or surrounded by spellcasters. At this level as well, we get another slot of 5th level, and we will add the 9th level spell, Wish. Wish is where Hakari gains a nearly infinite versatility and setup for his domain expansion. Before we go into what spells are interesting to replicate, I will mention a very fun, if not completely downright gamble use of this spell. When the fight is truly desperate and you need that last-ditch feverish gamble with your life kind of situation, you can wish for, I gain the benefits of an undisturbed long rest right now. Now, some DMs out there would smile and try to use this as an opportunity to mess with their players, but this here is where I tell you this, DMs. You already have your consequence. Make the Hakari at your table roll that 33%, and if they mess up, no more ultimate gamble, but if they succeed, they still have a strength score of 3 and 1d10 unavoidable necrotic damage per level of the spells they cast. However, don't forget that if their gamble pays off, they deserve the full reset. Ready to go again. Another wish locked in for a desperate gamble. If you're a cool DM though, feel free to let your version of Hakari at your table re-roll that 33% with either backstory quests, special boons, or items, so that they grow in power alongside the party. Now, another important note as well is that the necrotic damage will not stack, since the durations of spells stack, but not their effects. Now, for the spells that we can replicate with Wish, the first one will be Contingency. This will be important to store some self-targeted spells for specific occasions. In case you die, revive. In case you get poisoned, petrified, get reduced. Ability scores, charmed, feared. The world is your pachinko game with this one. This is especially relevant if you use scrolls or want your main spells ready to go in a pinch, like heal or a high-level cure wounds. I do have more suggestions though. For clearing effects, you can, for example, wish for Lesser Restoration, Greater Restoration, Dispel Magic, True Seeing, and other spells. Each of these can be stored into a Glyph of Warning, letting you spontaneously ignore extremely dangerous effects like petrification, poison, disease, or even illusions. In case of you getting petrified or taken out of commission, your party can quite literally just drop you on a glyph, and you will be all good immediately. Make sure you don't skip out on being prepared. Then there is Prevention, with Mind Blank, Circle of Power, protection from poison. Make sure to lock out your mind with Mind Blank, avoiding spells through a sheer quantity of cursed energy with Circle of Power, and flushing out poisons and toxins with protection from poison. All allow Hakari to reach a new level of resistance with his already insane regeneration. Next, you can boost the power of your domain with the Hallow spell, expanding your domain expansion, allowing enemies to become vulnerable to necrotic damage of his Empower punches with Inflict Wounds. This really nails down the massive increase in cursed energy he obtains from his domain, and makes it very scary for squishy foes and clueless cursed spirits. And finally, we have Tensor's Transformation, which is another very strong transformation spell. Trading immunities and AC for a chunk of temporary hit points also works pretty well. Not to mention, 2d12 on every punch is some much needed heft, just when Hakari needs to lay the smack down with some cursed energy reinforcement to keep himself protected. If you remember, unarmed strikes are weapon attacks for the purposes of the additional damage. And of course, since this spell is quite broad, make sure to be creative with your use of Wish, as the Feverish Gambler himself. And finally, at level 20, we gain a slot of 6th level while our spell selection remains unchanged. But most importantly of all, we get the subclass feature, Unearthly Recovery. And this feature will be the cherry on top for Hakari's already brutal recovery. Recovering half of his hit point maximum when under half hit points essentially involves a full recovery of his hit points. This is especially useful after pulling a gamble with Wish, or in a particularly tricky situation where heightened healing is needed. In the end, with his mighty healing, versatility, and recovery options, along with some selective debuffs, Hakari is built to outlast his foes and always get that jackpot. After all, the odds are always in his favor. For pros and cons, we will start with Hakari's pros. With this build, we have an intense amount of healing that is also accompanied by a very debilitating domain expansion, which can stack some important and nasty debuffs along with stacking some very nice buffs. Hakari is also somewhat versatile since he is a sorcerer and can cast and use a breadth of scrolls and spells. His concentration is also pretty good since he has proficiency in Constitution, and his martial ability is also pretty nice since he is a monk who deals 1d8 plus 3 damage with his punches alone, allowing for him to kind of hold himself in sheer melee combat. Additionally, if you want it to be, Hakari can also be a very good healer and a quality supportive spellcaster. For cons, Hakari doesn't have particularly good damage, especially comparing to the previous builds we have done on this channel. His mobility could also be better, and he lacks a very important spell, namely Counterspell, making enemy spells quite a bit more dangerous, but if he survives them, it will make those spellcasters consider attacking him more than twice for sure. Additionally, there is also a non-negligible chance that Hakari loses his ultimate gamble forever, along with debilitating him pretty severely. But in the end, it is also important to note that it being the ultimate gamble is precisely what we want with Hakari, so this con is lessened a little bit. Nevertheless, Hakari does also require preparation and cooperative teammates to end the targets around you while you stall as much as possible with your healing. There is also another consideration to have here of the tank fallacy, where enemies could unironically walk away from Hakari and go and target the team. But in the end, if they do target your team and they all go down, they now have to deal with a buffed up tank who has the equivalent of troll regeneration pretty much on command. So the choice in the end is theirs as to what gamble they're willing to take. And that's it for this episode of How Would You Build, focusing on the feverish gambler himself, Kinji Hakari, from the show of Jujutsu Kaisen. I hope that you've all enjoyed it, that you agree with me on some of these build decisions. If you have different opinions, or if you prefer to build Hakari, say, as a Zealot Barbarian, or maybe adding a bit of Bard to get that expertise into performance, you can totally do that as well. Feel free to drop your character suggestions using the 2014 rules or the 2024 rules down in the comments. It always makes me happy to see your versions of the builds, just as it makes you happy to see mine. So if you enjoy what you're seeing, maybe do a little bit of a subscribble. It'll make me very, very happy, and it will also tell me that you want to see more of these builds, because that is definitely the single best way to tell me that you want to see more lore-accurate builds from this little teddy. And I will be seeing you all very, very, very soon. Be it here on the Discord or maybe even on my coffee for more D&D builds and lore accurate characters. Make sure to enjoy your holidays. If you have some, get out in the sunlight and enjoy nature and your adventures. I will see you all very soon. Bye bye!